Most women believe the final word is spoken when they walk away. That silence is the last page of a love story, folded and closed. But some women don't walk away like thunder. They don't scream or break things, or hurl final accusations. No, some women disappear like a still lake swallowing a scream. They let go not in weakness, but in terrifying, bone-deep clarity. And that's the woman he can't stop thinking about. Because he expected drama. He was prepared for fireworks. He braced himself for one last emotional blowout, a pleading, a breakdown, a begging. But she gave him none of it. What she gave instead was her absence. And in that absence, a mirror haunting one. One that speaks louder than words ever could. In Jungian psychology, the anima, man's inner feminine, is rarely accessed consciously. Most men project her outward onto women they desire, women they fear, women they chase, and then sabotage. When she let go, he didn't just lose a woman. He lost the mirror of his own soul's whisper, the reflection of the parts of himself he was not yet ready to face. She wasn't perfect. She wasn't always calm, but she saw him in ways that terrified and thrilled him. And when she stepped back, when she stopped explaining, stopped trying, and simply let go, felt like the world cracked open beneath him. The silence she left behind is not quiet. It echoes, it howls, it gnaws. You see, a woman like her doesn't scream because she doesn't need to. Her absence is a language he never learned to read till it was too late. It's not that she disappeared, it's that she became untouchable. She became sovereign. She became the part of himself that he cannot reclaim through conquest, because she wasn't playing a role. She wasn't performing the good girl or the dream girl. She had done her shadow work. She had seen the wounded little boy behind his bravado, and still, she chose to love him. Not because he earned it, but because she could. But when the pain outweighed the hope, when his patterns devoured her tenderness too many times, she didn't collapse. She disengaged. That's the wound he can't heal from, because nothing in him knows how to fight something that will not fight back. Nothing in him knows how to forget a woman who knew herself too well to be consumed by his confusion. Her love was never the problem. It was her clarity. That clarity exposed the chaos in him. While he confused control for strength, she mastered surrender. Not the kind that makes you small, but the kind that makes you free, and freedom. To a man still chained by ego is the most haunting thing of all. He remembers her in quiet moments. It's not because he's still in love, but because her departure activated a war inside him. The archetype she carried, the wild feminine, the mystic, the nurturer, turned sage, left fingerprints on his soul. Fingerprints no other woman quite matches. Because most women will try to compete, try to win, try to prove, but not her. She wasn't trying to be chosen. She was the choice. And that's why he can't forget her. It wasn't the way she kissed him. It was the way she saw through him. The way she stayed present while he spiraled. The way she held her power without flaunting it. She didn't manipulate him. She didn't chase him. She didn't need him to become her purpose. She already had one. He mistook her gentleness for softness, mistook her forgiveness for weakness. But now, in her absence, he finally understands she was not soft. She was sacred. And he didn't lose her because she changed. He lost her because she remembered who she was. And when a woman remembers that, nothing a man does can pull her back into his storm. She doesn't need revenge. Her healing is the revenge. Her peace is the proof that he no longer holds any keys, that the power she once gave him was not stolen, but gifted. And now that gift has been revoked. She has become a woman only the worthy will know. And deep down, he knows he never was. Asterisk, he may not say it aloud. He may never admit it, not even to himself. But deep within the recesses of his unconscious mind, Her absence has taken root like a seed of eternal return. This woman, the one who didn't beg, who didn't explain, who didn't rage or crumble, haunts him. Not because she tried to hold him, but because she let him go with such unbearable grace. The modern man is conditioned to chase the visible, the loud, the demanding. His ego thrives on conquest, on resistance met and overcome. He finds identity in pursuit and pride in being needed. But the woman who walked away without a trace of need carved something far more piercing into his psyche, an unanswered question. You see, the ego cannot accept mystery, and she became exactly that. A silent riddle, a woman shaped not by his validation, but by her own reflection. Her worth wasn't up for negotiation, and that made her dangerous. While other women had danced to the tune of his inconsistency, she vanished when the music soured. Not with vengeance, but with self-respect. She didn't flinch when he pulled away. She opened the door wider. That is what he obsesses over now. Jung spoke of the anima, the feminine within every man, often projected onto the women he desires. She represented more than flesh and voice. She embodied longing, emotion, intuition, the deep soul of the unconscious. And when a woman embodies this archetype and then retreats, she awakens the man's forgotten inner world. He cannot follow her, not because she is hiding, but because she has returned to a realm he has not yet earned access to. This woman becomes his spiritual mirror, but not the kind that flatters or reflects who he wishes to be. No, she becomes the mirror that shows him where he is, hollow, every time he replays their conversations in his head. It isn't her voice he hears, it's his own silence echoing through the void she left behind. Every moment he tries to distract himself with noise or novelty, her presence returns like a ghost at the edge of awareness, never loud, but always there. He obsesses, not because she made him feel powerful, but because she made him feel small. Not cruelly, not intentionally, but simply by refusing to shrink for him. She didn't argue or plead for him to see her. She saw herself clearly, and that vision shattered the fragile glass of his self-importance. It's not that she broke him. She revealed where he was already cracked. He tries to recreate her in others, looks for her laugh in strangers, tries to rewrite the story with someone else playing her part, but the magic is gone. Because the power wasn't just in her, it was in the way she chose herself when he expected her to choose him. It was in the way she let him go, not out of weakness, but out of deep spiritual clarity. A clarity he's now desperate to touch, but doesn't know how to reach, and so she lives in his mind as a paradox. The one who walked away, yet never left. The one who didn't fight, but won. The one who said nothing, and yet her silence screams the loudest. His obsession isn't about love, not entirely. It's about the power she reclaimed, the narrative she refused to co-author, the ending he never got to write. Because men like him are used to closure being loud. They expect fire and fury, something to burn down so they can walk away scorched but satisfied. But this woman gave him nothing but space, and in that vast, echoing space, he was forced to meet himself. And that, more than anything, is why he can't stop thinking about her. He remembers how her eyes no longer searched his face for signs of affection, how her voice no longer bent to soothe his coldness, how she no longer adjusted herself to be digestible. She let the silence grow between them like a wild forest until he was lost in it. That silence, born not of fear, but of sovereignty, became the loudest thing he'd ever known. Because what wounds a man the most is not rejection, it's irrelevance. And she didn't make him feel rejected. She made him feel unnecessary. Not cruelly, not vindictively, just ... quietly, lovingly. And that is something the ego cannot forgive. Asterisk. He thought he could move on. He thought the ache would fade if he distracted himself long enough with new faces, louder laughter, and busier schedules. But obsession doesn't work that way. Not with her. not with the woman who didn't scream. When he fell short, but instead went quiet. The kind of quiet that seeps into your bones and makes a man question everything he ever believed about himself. He didn't realize it then. But her silence wasn't a retreat, it was a declaration. She wasn't withdrawing because she was weak. She was stepping into her power. She was choosing peace over proving herself. And that peace, that dignified stillness, was more confrontational than any argument could have been. You see, is a kind of woman who breaks you by healing herself, who doesn't wait for you to be ready, who doesn't try to drag love out of you with sobs or ultimatums. She doesn't need you to become what she hoped, because she has become what she needs. She simply leaves, not slamming doors, not with revenge posts or staged happiness. No, she walks away like someone who's been carrying her worth this entire time, just waiting for you to notice. And when you didn't, she didn't crumble. She just decided that her time was too sacred for hesitation, her heart too rare for games. And now, long after she's gone, he begins to understand. He begins to see her in flashes. In the quiet of an evening when the noise dies down. In the curve of a stranger's smile that doesn't quite reach the same depth. In the haunting realization that the only woman who truly saw him was the one he looked past. She's everywhere and nowhere. Not because she's chasing him, but because he's now chasing himself through the echo of her departure. He remembers how she stopped asking. Not because she no longer cared, but because she realized he never answered with anything real. She stopped laughing at half-hearted jokes, stopped showing up for plans he never confirmed, stopped pretending not to notice how rarely he asked. About her day, it wasn't sudden. That's what tortures him. It was slow, quiet, like leaves falling one by one. By the time he noticed the winter, she was already gone. And he wonders now, did she wait? Did she hope, in some small place, that he'd wake up and see her standing there, arms still open? Probably, but not for long, because she wasn't the kind of woman to beg to be seen. She was the kind to disappear with dignity when she realized. She was standing in front of someone with closed eyes. Now, every woman he meets stands in her shadow. Not because she was perfect, but because she was true. She wasn't performing for his affection. She wasn't molding herself to fit his ideals. She wasn't trying to be palatable. She was simply ... herself. And that scared him, because deep down, he knew he wasn't ready to meet someone who wasn't pretending. And now he's obsessed. Not with her body, though he remembers every curve. Not with her laughter, though it still rings in the back of his mind. But with the feeling she gave him of being known, armed, of being seen not as a role to perform, but as a man who could become more if only he dared. That is what won't let him sleep. He sees her rising now, not in his world, but beyond it, flourishing, glowing in spaces he was never invited into. Not out of spite, but because she outgrew the cage he mistook for a relationship. And what haunts him is knowing he didn't even realize it was a cage until she flew. And no, she won't come back. Not because she hates him, not because she's angry, but because going back would mean shrinking again. It would mean explaining again, would mean silencing parts of herself just to make him comfortable. And she's done with that. She's somewhere now, laughing fully, loving deeply. Maybe not with someone else, maybe just with herself. And that's enough, because her love isn't something to be earned by pretending. It's something to be met with honesty, with presence, with a heart that's ready. He wasn't ready, and now he's obsessed because he knows what he lost wasn't just a woman. It was an opportunity, an invitation, a mirror. She didn't leave to punish him. She left to preserve herself. And maybe, just maybe, to give him the space to find what he'd buried beneath ego and fear and avoidance. But whether he finds it or not, that's not her concern anymore, because the woman who doesn't leave in anger But in wholeness is not someone you chase. She's someone you remember forever. And perhaps the most agonizing truth of all is this: she didn't just elevate. She transcended, and in doing so, she revealed a path he now longs to walk, but cannot follow until he sheds the very parts of himself that pushed her away. She didn't leave him. She returned to herself. And now, he must do the same if he ever hopes to meet her again, not where she was, but where she's going. Asterisk, you see, a woman who let go isn't remembered simply because she vanished. She's remembered because she left silence in her wake, one that echoes louder than her presence ever did. That silence doesn't scream, it haunts. It doesn't beg to be heard, but it refuses to be forgotten. And in the strange, aching vacuum of her absence, a man often finds his real reflection, filtered, unmasked, and merciless. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And it is in her absence that a man begins to meet his unconscious. Not the polished persona he wears around others, but the raw, fragmented self buried beneath layers of ego, desire, and fear. The woman who walked away. She becomes the flame that sets his illusions on fire. What torments him is not just that. She's gone. It's the fact that she let him go without a storm, without theatrics, without needing closure. She didn't plead. She didn't chase. She simply released him as though her soul had already grieved his absence long before her body ever did to a man. This kind of woman is dangerous. Not because she harms, but because she doesn't need. Her energy is no longer orbiting around his validation. She's pulled her psyche back from the enmeshment and that disconnection. That spiritual unplugging. It hits harder than any insult ever could. She becomes the mirror he never knew he was standing in front of. Most men are drawn to women who reflect back their power. But this woman reflects back their lack of it. She doesn't play to his ego. She doesn't perform pain for attention. She recedes into herself. And the moment she does, the projections he once cast on her collapse. The fantasy shatters. The pedestal crumbles. And all that remains is the shadow he refused to see, the emotional cowardice, the broken boy, the fear of intimacy. She doesn't punish him. She exposes him by leaving. The woman who lets go has often already danced with her own demons. She's not foreign to loneliness, nor is she frightened by her own darkness. She's met her shadows and named them. So when a man shows up with half-truths, emotional immaturity, or egoic love, she doesn't argue with him. She doesn't try to fix him. She simply leaves him to himself because she's not afraid of being with herself. And that kind of power, it's unforgettable. Her detachment is not cold. It's sacred. It comes from wisdom, not bitterness. From depth, not indifference. She's not pretending she doesn't care. She's simply no longer willing to abandon herself for love. And once a woman reaches that level of sovereignty, no man can ever truly have her, not in the way boys want to possess women, like trophies, like extensions of their status, like breathing proof that they're lovable. This woman no longer serves as a mirror for his validation. She is now the mirror of his inadequacy. And if he hasn't done his inner work, that truth will drive him mad with obsession. He will scroll through her photos with a hunger he can't name. He will search for her essence in the eyes of strangers. He will wander in the quiet between relationships. If she's the one who got away, or the one who simply awakened and refused to stay, you may think she's just a memory. But no, she becomes his mythology. Not because she's perfect, but because she embodied something he wasn't ready for. Radical self-worth. He remembers how she smiled without apology. How she held eye contact like a woman who had already forgiven herself for everything. How she could love deeply but never cling. How she could cry and still walk away. How she chose peace over performance. How she touched him like she wasn't. Afraid to lose him, and she wasn't. Because you see, the woman who lets go is not emotionally numb. She's emotionally mastered. She doesn't collapse under the pressure of separation. She alchemizes it. She doesn't run from her pain. She transfigures it into power. He didn't lose her because he wasn't loved. He lost her because he didn't. Honor her love. She was there in his hands, not asking for everything, but refusing to shrink for anything. She was whole when she arrived. And that frightened the part of him still looking for someone to complete him. Her love was not a transaction. It was a mirror. And when he looked into it, he saw himself clearly on. What he saw was not enough. Not yet. Not for her, and so she. Left not to teach him a lesson, but to protect the parts of herself. She'd nearly betrayed trying to be patient with his potential, and that's what haunts him. That she left before he was ready. That she didn't wait for him to become who she is. Always hoped he could be. That she loved him. Perhaps more deeply than he will ever be loved again, but that her self-love was greater still. This is the paradox of obsession. It doesn't always come from rejection. Sometimes it comes from respect. The kind a man can only feel once he loses a woman who never begged to be kept. She didn't let go to punish him. She let go to return to herself. And in doing so, she became unforgettable. He doesn't understand it, not fully. He walks through the motions of his day like a man haunted. Her absence lingers like perfume in a cold room. Her silence is not empty. It echoes. It devours. What he cannot admit is that her leaving awakened something in him he spent years burying, something ancient, something primal. She did not beg, she did not explain, she did not scream to be seen. She vanished with grace, and in that vanishing, she became unforgettable. You see, when a woman lets go, truly lets go, she doesn't shatter, she sheds. She peels back the layers of projection he cast upon her, the role he needed her to play, the mask she wore to soothe his ego. When she finally releases him, she also releases herself from being the caretaker of his soul, the mirror of his masculine delusion, and without her reflection, he sees his own emptiness. Carl Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But only one of them was ready to transform. She descended into her shadow. She confronted the pain, the wounds, the longing that whispered lies about her worth. She held her inner child in the dark and said, "You don't have to earn love anymore." He, on the other hand, mistook her presence as permanence. He mistook her warmth as weakness. He believed he had time. Now he replays her every word like sacred scripture. He wonders what she meant when she said nothing. He searches her online presence for clues, for cracks, for signs that she aches like he does, but she does not, because she chose herself. You see, obsession is rarely about love. It's about ego. It's the ego's rebellion when its source of control slips away. He isn't obsessed with her. He's obsessed with the version of himself that existed in her presence. The man who was adored, validated, needed. And now that she is gone, he must face the terrifying truth. He no longer recognizes himself. What haunts him is not her touch, but her stillness. Not her voice, but the space where her voice used to live. A woman who lets go enters her feminine divinity. She no longer rushes to fix, to prove, to perform. She becomes untouchable, not because she is hard, but because she is whole. Her energy, once pouring toward him like a river, now flows inward, nurturing her own becoming. And he feels it. In his bones, in his dreams, in that moment between sleep and wakefulness. He tries to replace her. He seeks the same softness in other women, the same electricity, the same silence. but all he finds are ghosts, because once a woman has shown. You, the sacred, the shallow, becomes unbearable. She no longer needs closure. She became her own closure, he wonders. Why can't I stop thinking about her? But the real question is, why did he only start seeing her after she walked away? That's the cruelty of projection. He loved the idea of her, not the reality. He loved how she made him feel, not who she truly was. And when she peeled away the illusion, when she stopped performing and started being, he called it distance. He called it attitude. But it was, in fact, truth. And truth burns, so now he watches. Silently, he doesn't reach out, because deep down, he knows if she responded, it wouldn't be the same. Her energy has shifted. Her eyes no longer seek his approval. Her heart no longer waits for his call. She is not angry. She is not bitter. She is simply gone. And in that sacred departure, she became his most painful lesson. The man who loses a woman who did the work, who faced her shadow, who chose peace over chaos. He doesn't just lose her. He loses the version of himself that could have risen, but didn't. That is why he can't stop obsessing. Not because of what she did, but because of what he failed to do. Asterisk, there comes a moment in every man's life when he looks back, not just at what happened, but at what could have. At what should have. It doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't carry thunder. It comes quietly in the stillness of night, or in the unexplainable hollowness that lingers after a laugh fades too quickly. He's surrounded by noise, people, distractions. Yet it all feels paper thin. Nothing fills. Nothing grounds, because he remembers. Not her face, not even her voice, but the way she made space for him in a world that demanded he always be strong. The way she looked at him when he was silent, not judging, just listening. That kind of space. It's rare, and once it's gone, it never returns in the same form. He thought he had time. He thought she'd always be there, orbiting his chaos, bending to his seasons. He thought that as long as she hadn't slammed the door, she wasn't really walking away. But when a woman chooses to rise, she does not slam. She ascends. He didn't see it at first, the soft unraveling, the quiet withdrawal, how she stopped reminding, how she stopped initiating, how she stopped waiting. She wasn't punishing. She was evolving, and evolution is quiet. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need to post quotes or write cryptic messages. Her silence became her boundary. Her absence became her closure. And now he lives in a world where she exists without him. She breathes without needing his validation. She laughs without looking over her shoulder to see if he noticed. She's not trying to be missed. She's simply free. He wanted her to stay wounded because healing meant letting go, and letting go meant losing control. But she chose the wound. She stepped into it. She held it, bled in it, and then she walked out of it, reborn. Now, she glows in a way that terrifies him, not because she's unreachable, but because she is no longer looking back. He tells himself stories to soften the blow. She was too sensitive. She gave up too fast. She changed. And he's right. She did change. But not the way he thinks. She changed in the way a woman does. When she stops breaking herself to be digestible. When she stops editing her emotions to protect someone else's comfort. When she finally realizes that she can hold herself and she doesn't need to shrink to be loved. The love she once gave him now waters her roots. The tenderness she reserved for his brokenness. She pours it into her own soil. And what does he do? He scrolls. He watches. He wonders. He thinks about reaching out, but doesn't, because he knows the moment he speaks, she'll hear it. Not in his words, but in his energy. She'll feel the same weight, the same pull, the same familiar ache. and she will choose silence again. Not to punish, but to protect her peace. It's not that she stopped loving him, it's that she started loving herself more. And this is the part that breaks him, not her leaving, but her never needing to return. Because he knows if he had done the work, if he had sat with his fear, his pride, his past, if he had met her at the depths she stood in, they wouldn't just be a memory, they'd be a masterpiece. But masterpieces require effort, and he wasn't ready now. When people ask him why it ended, he shrugs, says something vague, maybe even smiles. But deep down, he knows. It didn't end because of something she lacked. It ended because he couldn't hold the kind woman who was finally ready to hold herself. Let that sit with you, because this story, it's not just about her and him. It's about all of us. About how we often wait too long to see the people who loved us, right? About how we confuse presence with permanence. About how we take gentle souls and test them until they harden. Until they no longer ask to be loved, they become love. And once that happens, they never look back. So let this not just be a regret, but a reckoning. If you have someone who still believes in your becoming, who still stands in the storm beside you, don't wait until they're gone to notice. Don't wait until they elevate to wonder why you were left behind. Love is not something to conquer. It is something to rise into. Because when she goes quiet, when she no longer explains, when she stops asking, it's not that she doesn't care, it's that she finally does. And that is the beginning of the end.